We're now on the record in the matter of Los Angeles Unified School District versus in Napa. We have taken a break of about 15 to 20 minutes, and we are continuing with the direct examination of the witness, Mr. Manzanar. With that, the witness is in the stand, and we are ready to continue. So, Mr. Irwin, the witness continues to be yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Manzanar, I believe we're talking about exhibit number 3 in front of you, is that correct?
Yes.
You had that exhibit in front of you?
Yes.
Did you say exhibit 3?
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh, okay. I understand. Thank you.
Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
And what is this document?
It's a notification to participate in an IEP meeting.
And what student is listed on this page?
Many others.
And on the top there, it says date of meeting, 29 May 2019. Do you see that?
Yes.
What does that date refer to?
The date of Benny's IEP.
Your Honor, just would like to move this exhibit number 3 into evidence.
You're familiar with this document, I take it, sir?
I am.
Okay, it's submitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. What is the location of the meeting?
Independence Elementary.
And there's a paragraph beginning with individuals invited to participate. Do you see that?
Yes.
And there are boxes next to certain titles. For example, there's parent. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is there a check in that box?
Yes.
Is there a box for psychologist?
There is, yes.
And is that also checked?
It is.
And is there a box for designated instruction and services?
Yes.
Is that also checked?
It is.
And what services are supposed to be present at that IEP meeting?
Language and speech and occupational therapy.
If you turn to page 12 of that same exhibit, and at the bottom section there it says, for school use only. Do you see that section?
Yes.
What is the purpose of this section?
To discuss means of notification.
And on the first section there it says method. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is there a drop-down menu with anything checked there?
Yes.
And what is that checked there?
Phone.
Who was this completed by?
The assistant principal, the APIS.
And who was assistant principal?
Ms. Del Real.
And when was this conducted?
On the date of the IEP.
I'm sorry. There's a box there that says when. Do you see that?
Oh, yes.
So there's a phone call made on what date?
Yes, I see now, yes.
What date was the phone call made?
May 21st, 2019.
And what was the response by the parent, if any?
Parent response, will attend, but reschedule if I do not. And the rest is
Okay, thank you. If you turn to if you turn to exhibit number 7 of the same exhibit binder. You recognize this document?
I do.
And what is this document?
It is Benny's IEP.
I'm sorry?
It is Benny's IEP,
When you say IEP, what does that refer to?
individualized educational program.
And what is the date of this IEP team meeting?
May 29th, 2019.
Were you present at this IEP team meeting?
I was, yes.
Is this a copy of Benny Avalo's IEP held on 29 May 2019?
Yes.
How do you know?
Because of the date. And
Well, I'm asking you to walk through the document and
Oh.
make sure that all the parts are there before you take that. It's the option.
Yes, I've confirmed that this is Benny Alvarez's IEP.
And I believe you testified earlier that this was an initial IEP, is that correct?
It is, yes. I
If
will.
you turn to page 67 of the same exhibit.
Just a second. Did the request, did you ask to be admitted?
I have not, Your Honor.
Well, I may be pushing you, so
Okay, that's fine.
I apologize.
The district requests that the exhibit number 7 be admitted as evidence, Your Honor.
Okay, foundation's been laid, the matter is admitted.
If you would turn to page 67 of the same exhibit. What section of the IEP is this page covered?
This is signature, names and signatures.
And on the left-hand column, it says parent guardian, do you see that?
Yeah.
Is there a signature associated with the parent or parents?
Yes.
And about midway down on the left-hand column, it says school psychologist, do you see that?
Yes.
Is your signature affixed to this page?
It is.
And I noticed that on the column where it says signature, there's 3 boxes that have print names in it. For example, Lindsay Wolf and Mr. Mary, do you see that?
Yes.
Why is there not a signature there? Do you know why?
A new feature of the Welligent program, which is the special education data tracking program that LAUSD uses, now offers an electronic signature whereby the person can simply input their credentials, their login credentials, and then it will sign the document for them, and it appears as as just a text.
Thank you.
Well, the simple question is, were those people present at the IEP?
Was that the question? I'm sorry.
Well, no. it
Well, I'm
wasn't-
asking you the question, were those people present at the IEP?
Yes, it were.
Okay, good. Thanks. I haven't seen this before, counsel, so I appreciate you asking when it was.
That was my first time too, Your Honor, so.
Okay.
Did you present your assessment results to the IEP team?
I did, yes.
And you testified the parents were present, is that correct?
They were, yes.
Did you provide them a copy of your assessment?
I did.
Now, when you presented your assessment to the IEP team, were the parents given an opportunity to ask questions?
Yes, they were.
Were they given an opportunity to raise any concerns?
Yes.
If you turn to page 52 of this same exhibit,
$52 or $60?
52, Your Honor.
Very good, thank you.
Were the results of your assessment incorporated into the IEP team, or into the IEP meeting?
Yes, they were.
What section of the IEP is this page represent?
This is the present levels of performance.
And what performance area?
Mhm.
Which performance area is listed?
General ability and cognitive functioning.
And where does this information come from?
It comes from my psychoeducational evaluation.
And on the bottom half of that same page, it says performance area, continued general ability, cognitive function. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is this also coming from your assessment?
Yes.
Turn to page 53 of the same exhibit. And I'll represent to you, this is a present level performance page of the IEP for Benny Avalos. What performance area is, does this page discuss?
Benny's social emotional status
And where does this information come from?
from my psychoeducational evaluation.
If you turn to page 64 of the same exhibit, please. And what page of the IEP does this page represent?
This is parent participation and consent.
About 2/3 of the way down on the same page, is there a signature in the box?
Yes.
And there's a circle that says parent or guardian. Which one is there any one of them that's blacked out or marked?
Parent is.
What's the date of that signature?
Date is 8/1/19.
And no further questions, Your Honor.
exhibits?
We're done, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, with the direct. Can you give an opportunity to ask some questions? Try to keep them direct. And if there's an objection, we'll figure it out, okay?
Okay.
Just introduce yourself. I'm sure you guys are already acquainted.
Yeah. Hi,
But
Mr.
it-
Manzanares.
Oh, how are you?
You remember me?
I do, yes.
Okay, so bear with me. Okay, I guess question number one. Mr. Manzanares, do you remember Benny while he was in school?
I never worked with Benny when he was in school, no.
So you don't remember having seen me or Benny like around campus?
No, first I don't remember seeing you and Benny on campus.
Oh, okay.
First time I met Benny was
when I took him
during
in.
assessment.
Oh, okay. Well,
Now remember to get into a rhythm here. Question. Let her
Hold.
finish
Oh,
question,
okay, and then-
respond. See, now you're talking over me.
sorry.
So, and your husband's nodding, so I'm not sure what that means.
Okay. Sorry, Your Honor.
No, you gotta be
I'm a little
careful there,
nervous.
Mr. Allen. So, no, it's just a rhythm. It's question, answer, question, answer.
Okay.
And both of you just try to get in that rhythm, because I know your prior experience with each other was much more of a conversation.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Manzanares, I remember seeing you in school. I remember because you were standing around the lunch area taking notes. So I'm assuming you were taking notes observing a student? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. So we're not allowed to talk about the particular student, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so can you tell me the school procedure that has to do with you being able to observe a child in the school setting? Like what does it take for the school psychologist to be able to go and observe a child? Is this something that's instructed to you, or?
It is a permission granted to me by the assigned assessment plan, yes.
Assigned, and who also Ms. Del Real makes an assessment plan. It's handed to you, and then you decide whether you go and observe a student in the classroom, or it's the procedure.
It's a procedure. It is a mandatory part of my process is observing the child both in structured and unstructured settings. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Ms. Del Real was supposed to hand you an assessment plan for Benny in order for you to have been able to go to Benny's classroom
Yes.
and make an observation. Okay. So did she ever instruct you to observe Benny? Did you ever receive a plan during his time in the school?
Not while he was enrolled. No.
It was
Subsequent when he was not enrolled. Yes.
when you finally received that assessment plan, did you question why the child was not in school?
I did question why he was not in school. Yeah.
Does that ever happen usually?
I mean, there are cases where it does happen, but they're not very common. It's a rare occurrence where I don't have access to observing the child within his school setting.
Do you know the school procedure Ms. Del Real was supposed to follow to be able to, excuse me, conduct an assessment plan? Or is that something that she has to answer, like on her part?
Your objection, vague, compound.
You understand the question?
No.
I guess, okay, do you know
Hold on
what
a
the
second,
school?
a second. You said objection, so, the question is being withdrawn. So, you may rephrase the question, the objection is moved. Restate your question.
Okay. Do you know what the school procedure is, like when a child enters the school,
Mhm.
he goes into a general education class.
Yes.
The teacher observes him and notices something that she wants to state to Ms. Del Real, a concern,
Uh-huh.
something that she sees. Do you know what's the procedure after that?
Typically, teachers submit, their concerns through the SSPT process, and then not necessarily Ms. Del Real, but the assigned person at the school, parents, principal, have a meeting to discuss concerns and ways to sort of ameliorate those concerns, different things that they can do within the child's general education placement in order to try to help the child.
What about the procedures when a parent walks into the school with a diagnosis already, a formal diagnosis already provided? So now the child is not a neurotypical student in a general education class. Now a child is being enrolled under the spectrum of having autism spectrum disorder.
Objection, Your Honor. Big narrative.
Do you understand what she's asking?
You're asking me the procedure for when a parent enrolls a child who has a diagnosis.
Yes.
I'll overrule, and I'll give you some leeway on this. Go ahead.
Well, if a child has a diagnosis, so the key then is whether the diagnosis or the symptoms that sort of make up that diagnosis are affecting the child's educational progress. So that's the key question. So there are numerous children at Independence Elementary who have diagnoses, right? And don't have services and don't have an IEP and have no intention of having an IEP because they can manage the demands of their educational program.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there a difference in the way you perform your assessments? Like, the child came in with a diagnosis versus the teacher having given a referral for an assessment?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a different way of conducting the assessments based off like how the news of the child's
Objection, big.
I think the witness, I'm going to entrust with the witness to tell me if he doesn't understand.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So for the vague objection.
Okay,
Other objections,
I
I'll
can
take on substantively. And I'm going to entrust you with that. If you don't
Okay.
understand, you indicate.
All right.
I'm
Thank you
sorry,
very
Mr.
much.
Manzanares.
No problem.
Okay, a child walks in with the diagnosis of having autism spectrum disorder.
Yes.
Child number one. Child number two is a child that was referred by his teacher, but is a neurotypical child in a general education setting.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow they both have to come to you for assessment, correct?
Yeah.
Like if there's a referral for, there's a referral here, there's a referral here on both students.
Uh-huh.
Does your assessment plan change based off each student? Like your assessment plan will be this way with student A. Your assessment plan will be this way with student C. Is that how it works? Like you choose which tool guides you think are best for the child based off, like, okay, well, they're coming in with the medical diagnosis
Mhm.
versus a teacher is stating that something seems, a little off. I wanted to
Mhm.
not say that, but,
I think I get your question.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Do my procedures change if I'm assessing a child who with a diagnosis as opposed to a child who was referred by teacher or school personnel, right?
Yes.
For my assessment. Truth is, no. The assessment procedures are going to be the same for each student. It helps if I have a medical diagnosis, right? Because it informs me as to the child's developmental, and it provides a lot of information that I can sort of validate based when I conduct my assessment. But no, the general process remains the same for either, in the case of either child.
Okay. So now, if I can ask about the particular assessments that you used
Yes.
with Benny, you said that you attempted to use one, and I completely forgot where it was at here, that he did not cooperate for, correct? So you had to change it to use another guide.
Yes.
Had he been enrolled in school, do you think it would have made it a bit easier, like observing him during his class settings maybe there's a chance you may have been able to use the first guide, the cognitive. I think I have it.
Okay, Judge, now cause for speculation.
I haven't heard the question yet. I think she's still working on it.
Oh.
Yeah, I was trying to find the. Oh, here it is. Okay, so the cognitive assessment system, the CAS2, right? You said that it says right here that, and that's in. I'm sorry.
The page
Exhibit.
number's in the lower right-hand corner.
Exhibit 4, page number 17
Of yours?
of his.
Or his, okay. Exhibit
Of
4.
the district's exhibits. Thank you.
Okay. What page?
17.
17.
Okay, so it states that the CAS2 was attempted, but Benny was unable to condition for assessment as a result of inattentive, distracted, and refusal behaviors.
Yes.
That was only during that time that you had with Benny when I took him to the.
Yes.
Would you have liked to have observed him a little bit more to be able to succeed in this specific guide?
Would I have liked to observe him?
Yeah, like he obviously didn't. He wasn't able to be assessed. So you moved on. You
Based
moved.
on that measure, yeah. Based on that measure, yes, he was. He did not condition for assessment. Yes.
Right. Had you been given more time, would you have been able to work a little bit more towards attempting to use that guide? Or was your choice the Southern California Ordinal Scales of Development good enough? Like, you thought, okay, let me use this one instead?
Let me stop for a second. I believe you're trying to ask, would there have been a greater likelihood that he would have been able to use the cognitive assessment system test
Yes.
if he had had an opportunity to observe Benny in another setting for a period of time? Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly what I was trying to ask. Thank you, Your Honor.
In other words, she's basically asking if you had had an opportunity to observe him in school, would it have been more likely that you could have completed the cognitive assessment system too? Or was that determination based solely on how he was dealing with the instrument?
Well, my observations of Benny are a separate section of the report. So when I assess, when I conduct a cognitive assessment, it is me working directly with the child. So I don't, I guess.
Oh, okay, I understand what you're saying. So it's different from just observing him,
Yes.
like from afar taking notes.
If I understand this statement, basically what you're saying on page 17 regarding the CAS2,
Yes.
this statement isn't so much an evaluation of his behavior like an observation. It's an evaluation of whether or not, because of this behavior, he can complete the instrument.
Yes, so the cognitive assessment system is a standardized measure that requires that I follow specific instruction given to me by that test, right, in a very rote or very sort of specific way, right? So otherwise, then the tests become invalid because if I, for example, Benny gives me kind of a response and I have to ask it again, that invalidates that question because I asked him again, right? So a standardized measure like the CAS requires that it be performed in a very specific way.
Oh, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and you chose to use this first. You attempted to use this
Yes.
first in your assessment with Benny.
A quick question while you're here. Would you have used the ordinal scales of development even if Benny was able to do the CAS? Or did you use that instead?
If you were able to manage the demands of the CAS, I probably would have just used the CAS.
Okay.
And how much time, do you remember how much time you dedicated to the attempt of using the CAS?
It must have been somewhere between 7 to 10 minutes.
7 to 10 minutes. would you say that times of attempts vary from psychologist to psychologist? Or is it like a standard, you can only use 7 to 10 minutes with this test? If it passes to 11 minutes, then it's invalid. Is that one of the specific requirements?
No, but if I had already presented a question that is from a standardized measure, if I had already presented a question to Benny, and I had subsequently, maybe like on the next day, tried to give him that question again, that question would be invalid. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the instructions are often referred to as the protocols.
The protocols are those booklets where I sort of, write notes and also, indicate the student's response.
And those are booklets that are provided by the test maker.
Yes.
And they provide guidance as to how the test should progress
Yes.
and be administered.
Yeah.
And were you using those?
Yes.
Okay. You may proceed.
Thank you. So, Mr. Manzanares, do you need a specific degree or specific certificate to be able to use these guides for an assessment? Like, do you as a school psychologist, a certain degree is required, otherwise you cannot use this as a guide?
As an assessment?
As an, let's say the CAS2, it's a booklet, correct? Where you take notes, it gives you instructions as to how to perform those specific, do you need like a certain degree or a certain certificate to be able to use it for your assessments?
Yes.
You do need one, otherwise
Yes.
you're not allowed to use them?
Yes.
What is?
Otherwise, it potentially invalidates the results.
But it's so just for validation.
I think she's asking, in order to administer a standardized test,
Yeah.
do you need to be credentialed or have a particular degree, and if so, what?
Yes.
Yes.
And if so,
what is the?
A school psychologist. I mean, it varies. It could be, somebody with it's typically somebody with a psychology degree, an advanced psychology degree.
And credentialed with the state.
And credentialed with the state, yeah.
Credentials with the state, okay.
That's a distinction, that, you can have a degree, a master's in psychology, but in order in public schools to be a school psychologist, you have to be credentialed as a school psychologist. And that requires certain additional standards that you have to meet. So, and he's testified that he is, both has a master's in school psychology and has also been credentialed by the state of California to be a school psychologist.
Okay. So.
The question you should follow up on is what sort of training does he receive as a school psychologist and a credentialed school psychologist in order to administer these tests that authorizes him and enables him to administer these tests?
Right. I know. I was trying to think of how to ask that.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine.
I'm sorry. I'm just so nervous.
Could you answer that question? I mean, what sort of training have you received, for example, in getting your master's degree and also in your credentialing requirements that enables you to administer these standardized tests?
I've taken several courses on administering standardized tests and non-standardized tests and child development courses. Yeah.
And it's necessary that you have those before you get your credential.
Yes.
Okay.
So he wouldn't be credentialed unless the state already found out he was authorized to administer the test.
Correct. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Manzanares. So as a school psychologist, you have the credentials to be able to administer these guides. But the credentials, like your degrees, they don't need to be specific to the field of autism, correct? Like you don't need to have because I'm not sure how bachelor's degree thing works, but is there such thing, like, I noticed that you have a bachelor's in arts, correct?
Yeah.
In your resume?
Yeah.
So is there, you can have.
Objection, Your Honor, that there's a mistake, it is a Bachelor of Arts. I believe she stated Bachelor in Arts.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I have a Bachelor of Arts
Okay,
in psychology.
that's, first of all, you guys need me for this conversation. So objection is confirmed. You can restate your answer in light of the objection regarding her question.
Okay.
So go ahead and restate your answer. You started to do that.
I have a Bachelor's of Arts degree in psychology, yes, from UCLA.
Degree in psychology.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So it's a bachelor's of something in a specific area. That's how bachelors go. So is there? Oh, okay. So I guess this leads me to my next question. Okay. So let's say that there's 3 individual assessors and they all perform an assessment on Benny, correct? One of them has a certificate. I'm sorry, one of them is a certified autism specialist and board certified behavioral analyst. He uses every guide that you yourself used. The second one, the same, the second, the same, but does not hold is not certified autism specialist, not a board certified behavioral analyst.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that the results of each individual assessors, their results would be the same?
Your Honor, objection, calls for speculation, it's a hypothetical.
Well, it is calling for speculation, but I think the hypothetical that she's asking is if people have different degrees, though they all might be qualified to give the test, would the different degrees affect the test outcome?
Correct.
Are you able to answer that?
Well, as a school.
Will we reach the same conclusion? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Well, that's different. Conclusion and outcome of the test are different. Because an individual who is legally appropriate for administering these tests is not just to follow the instructions and the protocol, but that they're also qualified to interpret the results.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So she's basically asking you if someone with a different degree, though they were qualified to administer the test, would come up with a different test result, a standardized test result.
Yeah.
I would have to speculate and.
Well, then we'll
say-
stop there. So, objections affirmed, it calls for speculation. You can ask a witness a hypothetical, but if it requires too much speculation on the witness's part, then it's not an appropriate response to the hypothetical.
Okay.
Can I clarify what you're saying?
You certainly may.
All right, so a board certified behavior analyst would not be able to perform the same test that I would, right? A board certified behavior analyst would use different measures, and it would be a very sort of scientific sort of approach to Benny's behaviors. They would focus on behaviors, right?
Right.
Whereas my psychoeducational assessment is a comprehensive, looking at, responses from you, teacher, working with Benny one-on-one. It is more comprehensive than a report that a board certified behavior analyst would be able to provide, which would focus on one, maybe 2 behaviors, and really look at the function of those behaviors.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
Thank you for
So,
clarifying.
yeah, so, I've worked several times, with a team sort of assessing a child at once, right? But we're all looking at different areas, so I think that helps.
Yes, it does,
Let's
very
stop
much.
for a second. I just want to emphasize, though, one of her fundamental questions was, if someone's giving a standardized test, the results of the test, like you administered the BAS, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Those results are not going to be different based upon whether someone has a degree in psychology or a degree in counseling. Because those tests are standardized, they have to be administered in a certain way, and then they're graded, or typically sometimes by a computer program, sometimes by the assessor. And the numbers are the numbers
Okay, great.
from those sort of tests.
Thank you so much for clarifying. I didn't know that that's how it was. Does the school ever bring in a board certified behavior analyst to perform an assessment on a child?
At LAUSD, maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Have they, in your experience, I'm so sorry, Ms. Manzanares, like in your time in the school, you said that you've been there since 2018, 2019. Have you ever seen Independence Elementary bring in a board certified behavior analyst to perform an assessment on a child?
No.
Never.
You should know, though, that many school psychologists also have that board certification in behavior analysis.
Okay. Do you have that?
I do not, no. Although I have completed all the coursework necessary and my supervision hours, I don't have that designation.
Okay. Would you ever be open to allowing like wanting to collaborate with a board certified behavior analyst so that they can conduct their assessments, you can conduct your assessments, and you guys can maybe collaborate as a team for the best interest of the child?
Okay.
Yes.
Objection,
Okay,
comments, Your Honor.
It's sustained. Basically, she's just wondering, I mean, would you be willing, or have you worked with BCDAs in doing a multidisciplinary type of
Yes.
report? Or let's say a team report that may have included a separate FBA, functional behavior assessment?
Yes, yes, I have.
You
been in
have?
cases, I have been in cases where the BCBA is involved, or another entity to conduct an FBA, yes, at this concurrently with my psychoeducational assessment.
What is an FBA?
A functional behavior analysis.
Functional. Thank you so much. Let's see. Were you ever, okay, let me try to think how I can. If you were given the opportunity, would you have liked to have assessed Benny in a class setting also? As opposed to just only when, you know, they called me and I took Benny, you observed him for, what was it, about an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Would you have preferred to have, let's say that day Ms. Elreal thought, oh, well, it might be a good idea to take him into a classroom and see kind of how he does, and let's go ahead and observe him that way. Did you have any intentions of? Okay, let me rephrase my question.
So
Is there a
you
reason?
Say withdraw. Think about what you're asking before you start talking.
Okay.
Okay, that's just fair. And try to. You're basically asking regarding his observations. So think about it and then ask the question.
Okay, Mr. Manza, withdraw. I'd withdraw my previous
You're
question.
doing good.
I'd like to state my question. Did you ever think, when you knew you were going to assess Benny, did you ever think of assessing him in a class setting? Like, you obviously didn't. We were there. We were in the resource.
Now you're talking. Just ask the question.
Did you ever think of assessing him like based off also observing him in a class setting?
I mean, that's the ideal. I mean, to have a child where I can observe him numerous times a day within his educational program, and sort of use those observations to guide my assessment. Yeah, that's ideal, but it wasn't available to me for Benny's assessment. I mean, that
What is the reason why it wasn't available to you?
because he wasn't enrolled.
But could you have just asked permission from the principal to have just maybe placed him in a temporary class setting just for the time that Benny was there with you? Could that have been an option? Like to take him into maybe to Ms. Ochoa's class once again to kind of reenact the time setting he was in prior to.
It might have been useful, but I wouldn't, count too much on it because you also have to look at a child's progression within his educational setting, right? So, and you also have to give a child time to sort of acclimate to the demands of the school day, right? Just putting a child within a classroom in which he's, not too well versed on the specific procedures of that classroom, or the rhythm of the day of that classroom, it probably wouldn't provide me that much additional information to just observe him in a classroom, as a visitor,
But isn't that how you conduct your observations when you have a student currently enrolled in the school?
Yes, but the child, in that instance, the child is not a visitor. He's a member of that classroom.
I'm sorry. Let me. I'd like to re-ask my previous question.
Okay.
Could it have been an option for us to obtain permission from the school principal to allow Benny possibly a full day of being a visitor in his school because Benny would have been
You're testifying. So you need to ask a question. So you're asking about his observation. He's already indicated to you that though, even if he were able to observe Benny in the class, if he was just put in there for a day, it would not have been very useful because it would not provide the sort of information if he had been a member of the class, how he was responding to routines he was aware of.
Okay.
And how he was interacting with students who we have seen day after day. Those are the things that provide valuable information and observation, and he said he wouldn't have had that benefit. So now you're testifying about what you have done or what options you were given. And you can testify as that if you want to, but right now you're asking him a question. Just try to focus on what you're trying to ask him. He's indicated what his professional opinion is as to the value of observing Benny in a classroom where he is not really a member of the class.
Okay.
So
I understand. Yeah.
Okay, so
Well,
that's
a
all
one-day
pointed out.
visitor's pass. Okay. That's true. I guess I withdraw my question.
Very good.
Yeah. So I think that's it. I think no further questions.
Oh, okay. Mr. Irwin?
Or maybe just one brief follow-up.
This, by the way, is known as redirect.
Okay. Redirect.
That's why he's asking a few more questions.
Okay. That's all right.
No, it's good. Would you turn to the district's exhibit binder on exhibit number 1?
Yes.
You testified earlier, this is the district's assessment plan of Beniopolis, is that correct?
That's correct.
Were you able to assess student prior to getting permission from, or consent from parent to assist Benny?
Objection. Can I object to something?
Well, you can object, but remember you can't object because you disagree. You can only object because the question is not relevant.
He keeps stating that this page is the special education assessment plan. This one.
What page are you on? Again, Council?
Oh, sorry, because he had
This is the
stated.
exhibit. It's the exhibit, actually, Your Honor. The entire exhibit one is the assessment plan.
Yes.
This particular page is called the assessment notification. The first one prior to the assessment plan?
Page one is the.
Page,
Oh, okay.
page one is.
I see what you're saying, I see what you're saying. She's just pointing out that it's only page 2 and 3, that's the assessment plan. Well, actually, only page 2 is the assessment plan. The next page are explanations of some of the terms. And then the first page is the notice.
All right, thank you.
That's all she's pointing out.
All right, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, so it's sustained, and you're referring to page 2? Or
Yes,
page
Your Honor.
3? Page,
Well, if you turn to page 2, the exhibit number 1.
thank you very much.
Are you able to assess a student prior to obtaining consent from a parent to assess?
I'm not allowed.
And with Benny, did you obtain consent from a parent before proceeding with your assessment?
I did obtain consent.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Should I?
Do you have any further questions?
No further questions, Mr. Manzanares.
Okay, okay. You're doing good. I have just a couple of questions, I think. Let me go through my notes, all right? Oh, and since this is your first time testifying, I should counsel you that the judges in these due process proceedings do get to ask some questions.
Okay.
But I may not have any, because they may have been answered as you continue to testify. Oh, yes, I think it had to do with your Vineland. It might be helpful if we can turn to that in the exhibit. So the psychoed is exhibit 4, district exhibit 4.
Okay.
And hold on a second.
Yes. Page 27.
Page 25 is where it begins. Actually, it's the autism spectrum rating scale.
Yes.
And then if we turn to the next page, page 26.
Yes.
Okay, now you had both parents fill this one out. Which is which? You said that, I think you said that you, both mother and father completed the autism spectrum rating scale.
If memory serves, I did not have an instance where both parents went.
And by the way, either of you are welcome to inform me if I misheard the witness.
What?
I just thought that on
It's
page
on-
20, just a second, on page 26, I see parent listed under 2 columns. And I think that I have a note that indicated that you thought that both mother and father completed that scale, and that's why you have 2 columns.
No, if you look at page 25, the chart got cut off. So, parent-teacher,
Mhm.
those are meant to see, so a parent-teacher unit goes with either elevated, slightly elevated, or it goes with very elevated. And those are parent and teacher.
Oh, that's what was cut off.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So that's very similar to what you had in the VASC here.
Yeah.
At the top, the at-risk and clinically significant VASC. But you had only one scale response on the autism spectrum rating scale from the parent.
Yes.
Your Honor, I have notes here that state that, Mr. Manzanares did state that mother and father both rated.
He thought that for a moment, and he's correct.
Oh, okay.
I sensed a certain tentativeness when he answered that, so I just wanted to follow up with a question to make sure. And of course, you know, at first, it seemed consistent, but there just happens to be a cutoff on the bottom of page 25
Oh.
as to, and is it similarly at-risk and clinically significant on the autism?
No, the autism spectrum rating scale uses elevated and very elevated.
Okay, hold on.
As descriptors.
Those are the descriptors, very good. almost done here. You mentioned that the adaptive skills were significant, first of all, significant in intellectual disability eligibility, because that must be evaluated along with his cognitive function, his cognitive capabilities, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then it's also relevant to your evaluation of autism as an eligibility, is it not? His behaviors?
Yeah.
Or do you rely primarily on the autism spectrum disorder test?
To endorse autism
Mhm.
as an eligibility?
Yes.
Well, if I'm looking at behaviors, then I rely on observations and interviews mostly.
Okay.
If I'm only looking at autism, if I'm looking at intellectual disability, then I will also rely on the responses for the adaptive skills measure that I give.
Now, you mentioned that you did not you did not recommend that he be found eligible for intellectual disability as an eligibility.
Yes.
And you mentioned that on page 29. So even though I'm not here to evaluate that necessary recommendation per se, I'm interested if you could indicate to me why you found him not to be intellectually disability eligible when there had been a diagnosis to that effect.
He did meet certain criteria for intellectual disability, but the main one is demonstrating significantly below average intellectual ability. And I put there that it was unclear whether Benny was unable or unwilling to perform some of my assessment tasks. And for that reason, there was a certain lack of clarity as to his cognitive level. The assessments that I did perform, although generally he performed within the below average range in terms of cognitive ability, he did have splinter skills, meaning those skills that where he scores higher or within the low average range, he did have those skills present. And so given that uncertainty as to his cognitive level, I didn't think it appropriate to endorse intellectual disability.
Thank you. Okay, I have no further questions. So, Ms. Torres, you got anything?
No further questions.
Okay, how about you, Mr. Irwin?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm going to excuse the witness. I'm going to remain on the record while the witness exits. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Very
Mr.
patient
Rosano.
with us.
Thank you.
So let the record reflect that the witness has exited the hearing room. This witness had been scheduled to 12:30, and we're looking to put on Ms. Medrano and Ms. Wolf, and both of those seem to be rather short. Do you wish to wait till we come back from lunch to tell me whether or not, Mr. Irwin, you're going to call Ms. Del Real?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Yes, we're going to wait till the end of lunch for you to tell me that?
Yes, Your Honor. Yeah.
I didn't ask that question very well. So I'll withdraw that and restate it. So. Okay, very good. And can you, let's see, it's a little afternoon. Do you want a lunch at 1:30 or maybe 1:15? I don't know if your witness can get here before then. It may not be worth trying to get a rusher.
You know, I actually have 3 witnesses out in the waiting area right now. I do have the OT.
Well, I'll only have 20 minutes for Ms. Medrano. Shall we put her on?
It really depends on cross-examination.
Say again?
It's really going to depend on cross-examination.
Okay, I tell you what, let's have lunch, and then we're not going to have to worry about that.
Your Honor, we
Yes.
can, the cross-examination would be my
Yes.
questions as well. I don't think I have too many questions to ask Ms. Medrano.
Oh, that's great. You want to go ahead and bring her in? That way she can be dismissed?
That's fine, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. Let the record reflect that counsel is retrieving his second witness.
Have to be here.
I'm not sure.
It's not that
Remember, I'm still on the record.
important.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, let the record reflect that the witness is in the witness stand. I'm going to ask you to remain standing. I'm going to swear you in. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during your testimony here today? So help you God.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Please be seated. Would you please state your full name and spelling?
Marisol Medrano, Marisol. Last name is Medran.
Have you ever testified in a hearing before?
No.
Okay, well, good morning. My name's Judge Woosley. Thank you for being here. I'm going to give you what's known as a few instructions that might help your testimony proceed quickly. First of all, we're recording, making an audio recording, the official record. You can see that sort of disc up there, that's actually the microphone. And you don't have to speak into it, just speaking over it is fine. But since we're making a recording, it's very important that your responses are clear if there's a transcript. So if you need to say yes, say yes. If you need to say no, say no. Nods and shakes of the head record very badly. Also, are pretty ambiguous. Don't worry if you do it. We all end up doing it, and we'll remind you if you do it, as I hope the parties remind me if I do. Now, during your testimony, you'll be asked a number of questions, but we don't want you to guess. We're looking for your best answers. So answers such as "I don't know," or "I don't remember," those are all fair answers. If you have a basis for good faith estimate, though, we're entitled to the estimate. Estimates often have to do with frequency and time. You may not recall the exact date something happened, but you have enough personal knowledge where you feel comfortable saying, well, I'm not sure the exact date, but I think it was the first 2 weeks of September. So if you have a basis for a good faith estimate, we give that to us.
Yes.
If for any reason you do not understand the question, say so, and we'll have the question rephrased. We don't want you guessing. And that's often what you're going to end up doing if you don't understand the question. Also, on occasion, you might hear someone say objection. If you do, just sort of stay put, and the parties and I will sort it out, and then I'll let you know whether or not you should answer. In front of you are a couple of booklets. Those are exhibits. One is the student's exhibit. The other is the district's exhibit. The district exhibit has the district seal on it, so that's a good one. Each of the exhibit numbers are the same as their tabs. So you might be referred to like District Exhibit 6 or Students Exhibit 5. Just go to that tab. If you get a little lost as to where you're being directed, just say so. It's important that all of us are in the same place, same page, when you're answering a question about a document. So will you do that for us?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions of me?
No.
Okay, Mr. Irwin, the witness is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Medrano, what is your educational background? Start with your bachelor's degree first.
I have a bachelor's in child development from Cal State LA. I have a master's in education. I have a general ed multiple subject teaching credential. I have a mild to moderate educational specialist, which is like my special ed credential with an authorization in autism.
Can you just tell us what is your employment history with respect to education?
I've been working for LA Unified for 12 years as a resource specialist teacher.
And what is a resource specialist teacher?
The resource specialist teacher is a teacher that works with students with have been identified with a disability through their IEP. So I work with them in short sessions, anywhere from 40 to 45 minutes a day to work on their IEP goals. I do initial academic assessments as well as 3-year academic assessments.
And you testified that you had mild to moderate credentials, is that correct?
Correct.
What type of coursework do you have to obtain this credential?
You have to go through a credentialing program, which I did with LA Unified. So there's classes regarding assessing students, how do we work with kids depending on their eligibility or their disability, how to write those IEPs. So it's a coursework on, being able to work with children who have different learning abilities and needs.
What schools have you been assigned to as a resource teacher?
I worked at Maywood Elementary. And
Go and say that name again.
Maywood Elementary.
Maywood, thank you.
Huntington Park Elementary and Independence Elementary.
And how long have you been assigned to Independence Elementary School?
Approximately 6-7 years.
And that's your current assignment, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what are the duties of a resource specialist at Independence?
So my duties are to work with students who, through their IEPs, have resource specialist program services, which is to work towards the IEP goals that we developed and agreed upon in their IEPs. I also, once I receive an assessment plan, either for initial or a 3-year, I conduct those academic assessments.
Approximately how many assessments have you conducted?
Over 100,
Approximately how many IEPs have you attended?
over 100,
You know a student by the name of Vinny Avalos?
yes.
And how do you know Vinny?
I know Benny first from when he was briefly enrolled in Independence Elementary and when I assessed him for his IEP.
Can you turn to exhibit number 2 in the black binder, district binder? You recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
And what is this document?
It is my academic report that I gave to the parents.
Is this a copy of the academic report that you gave to a parent?
Yes, it is.
And what student is referenced on this assessment?
Benny Avalos,
And we refer to parent. Which parent are you referring to?
Cynthia, the parents of Benny.
Yeah, I request that they just move this into evidence. Exhibit number 2.
What exhibit are you on?
Number 2, Your Honor.
Very good. Have you reviewed all the pages, and does this appear to be a true and correct copy of your assessment?
I haven't, it is.
It is? Okay, very good. It's admitted.
What was the reason for the referral of this assessment?
I believe it was a parent requested for a child to be evaluated.
And how did you prepare for this assessment?
I got the necessary protocols, I reviewed the queue, that's the community queue that we have on file for the time that he was enrolled in school, and I spoke to his teacher, Ms. Ochoa, when he, the class that he was in when he was at Independence.
And you say when the student was attending Independence Elementary School, in the middle of that page, on the first page, it says cumulative records review. Do you see that?
Yes,
How many days was Vinny present?
he was present for 27 days.
If you turn to page 6 of that assessment,
You will note in the lower right-hand corners, there are bait stamps. Those are actually the numbers that we're using. Okay.
top of the page, you see a section that says test information. Do you see that?
Correct.
What does that area cover?
That area covers the assessment that I gave him, which is the Woodcock-Johnson 4 Test of Achievements, Form A.
And what is the Woodcock-Johnson?
It's a standardized test that tests a child's academic achievement, where they are academically in reading, writing, and math.
And in order to administer this test, do you have to follow protocols?
Yes,
do you have to follow test instructions?
Yes,
Are you qualified to administer this Woodcock-Johnson?
yes.
And what is a Woodcock-Johnson test?
It tests reading, writing, and math.
And how is it administered?
It's usually administered one-on-one, myself and the student. I read the test directions as they're given. There's usually an example or a sample test question to see if the child understands. Once we've established that, we follow on with the assessment.
And were you able to get a valid result when you administered the Woodcock-Johnson to Vinny?
Yes.
You turn to page 9 of the same exhibit. What does this page represent?
This represents the scores from the Woodcock-Johnson.
Did you share this score report with anybody at the, I'm sorry, withdrawn, let me rephrase. Did you share the result of the score report with the school psychologist at Independence Elementary School?
Yes,
Was your score report incorporated into the psycho-educational evaluation conducted by Mr. Manzanares?
yes.
Any further questions, Your Honor?
Do you have any questions?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Ms. Madonna. Do you remember me?
Of course.
Do you
I do
remember? Oh, sorry. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
Do you remember Benny?
Yes, I remember Benny.
Do you remember Benny while he was in school?
The limited-
Enrolled in school?
The limited times I had interactions with him, yes.
Were you ever given instruction to observe Benny in his classroom during his time in school?
I don't recall, honestly.
Are you supposed to obtain instructions to observe a child in their school? Like, is Ms. Del Real, I know she's the assistant principal of the schools in charge of the special education department. Do you need to wait for an instruction from her to be able to observe a child in his class setting?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. This is not an observation, this is a standardized test.
Sustained. All she did and all she was required to do at this point in time was do the standardized test, the academic test. So if you want to ask questions about observation, you have to first ask her whether or not observation in the classroom was appropriate for her to do it, or was necessary for her to do the standardized academic test. That's the foundation to give your question relevance. So ask her the question. Was it necessary for you to observe the student, Benny, in the classroom in order to evaluate his academic performance by a standardized test?
Sorry, Ms. Medrano, I withdraw my previous question. Was it necessary for you to observe Benny in his class settings in order for you to perform your assessments?
To give him the Woodcock-Johnson board, no.
No.
So therefore, your question regarding whether she observed is not relevant to the question we have before us.
Okay.
I'm not saying that it may not in another setting, okay, be relevant, but here to determine whether these assessment plan is legally appropriate, no. So the objection is sustained.
Okay.
You need to ask another question, that's fine.
I got a little lost.
I know,
I'm
I know
sorry.
it's very confusing, so just remember what we're talking about today. Okay, and her role was in the assessment process, in the psychological, or the psychological, psych ed assessment, thank you, jump in any time, please, was to do the academic assessment. And for that, she used the Woodcock-Johnson, 4, I believe it is now.
Correct.
Test of achievement, which is standardized test.
Okay. And you used that specific guide for your assessment because Benny was not enrolled in school? Or do you utilize the same one with a child enrolled in school or a child not enrolled in school?
The Woodcock-Johnson,
Yeah.
Test of Achievement 4 is the one that the district, has us use, and we use them for every child, when we do an initial or a 3-year.
Okay, for every child.
The Woodcock-Johnson 4 is, that's a standardized test.
Correct.
And standardized test means it is normed, is that
Correct.
right?
It is
And,
not.
and you typically have results therefore that indicate where that student's academic achievement is when compared with other students usually are about the same age, correct?
Correct.
So, it's just normed. It's a number that says where a child performs at a certain age when basically compared to the other population of the same age of students. And when it says normed, it means it includes all types of students. You know, types of students ethnically, culturally, socioeconomically, whether they've had preschool or not preschool, it's just normed amongst all of them. And that's the results that's the basis for the results of the test.
Oh, okay, so it didn't matter, for Benny to have been observed in the class, or not, the test can be used the same, correct? Whether Benny was enrolled and you were observing him, or you just observed him in your classroom, is that?
The test doesn't require me to observe him, it just requires me to administer the test following the directions and the protocol that it has.
I guess my question is, are the results different if the child is in the school, being observed in the school setting, rather than just like a 1 hour observation and just in the resource class? Will the results be different?
I don't understand.
Well, that's a fair question. I think what she's asking is your observation of Benny during the hour or so of the assessment. Would you have gotten a different result if you also were able to observe him in the classroom?
I could have gotten a better picture of how he performs in the classroom, but the results of the Woodcock would have been the same.
Oh, okay.
Because the observation wouldn't have been factored into the Woodcock-Johnson, even though, you know, so it wouldn't have changed the scores. It would have maybe given me a different picture of what he can and can't do in a school setting, but not on the assessment.
Oh, okay.
And your observations that you recorded in your assessment report, those were for purposes of demonstrating the validity of the assessment results?
Correct.
And also you gave those to the school psychologist?
Correct.
And you would expect the school psychologist perhaps to use your observations of his behavior and assessment.
Correct.
But it doesn't affect one way or the other the assessment results of the standardized Woodcock-Johnson.
Correct.
Thank you for that
No,
clarification.
you're
I'm sorry,
welcome.
Mrs. John.
No, it's okay. You're welcome.
As we mentioned before, there's a lot to figure out.
Yes.
And you're working hard at it, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions, Mr. Irwin?
No, no.
Okay, I want to thank you. You're excused.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
We
John.
went
You're
too
welcome.
hard on you. We're-
I
No, you guys
know.
are
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and break for lunch. We'll start again at 1:30.